Hello, this is Stephen Hawley Martin. Welcome to The Truth About Life. In today's program, I'll relate important points from my book, Keys to the Kingdom and the Life You Want. If you like what you hear, check out my YouTube channel, Stephen Martin. That's Stephen with a PH. You'll find more to interest you there, and I'll be posting new programs every few days. Mystics from every religion, at least the ones I'm aware of, and even those who don't have a religion per se, tell us that mankind is on a spiritual journey, and that soul growth is the purpose of life. If you read my book, Keys to the Kingdom, you'll find that I have come to the same conclusion. The question one might ask is, how can I accelerate the process? Well,
to move ahead, it's important to know where you now stand. In Further Along the Road Less Traveled, Scott Peck discusses his theory of the stages of spiritual growth. At stage 1, people are unprincipled and antisocial, in a condition totally absent of spirituality. While they may pretend to be loving, all their relationships are self-serving and manipulative. The stage 1 person has a difficult time of it if he ever gets in touch with himself and realizes the chaos within and the hurt he has caused. Some unexplained suicides may come about as a result. On a happier possibility is that the stage 1 person may suddenly and dramatically convert to stage 2. Those in it depend on an institution to keep them on the straight and narrow. For most in our society, this is the church. They tend to be attached to ritual and dogma and become very upset if someone challenges it or tries to institute change. They think of God as an external being, perhaps picturing a man who looks like Michelangelo's depiction on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, or maybe one with a long white beard. Be aware, however, many Christians and followers of other religions are by no means stuck in stage 2. Many are well into stage 4. A characteristic these advanced believers share is an image of God as immanent in all creation. We will explore this, but first, let us consider the characteristics of stage 3. Stage 3 individuals were likely to have been raised in a family headed by stage 2 parents who were dogmatic in their beliefs. By the time they reached adolescence, they were questioning the faith. To the horror of their parents, they eventually fell away from the church and became agnostics or atheists to arrive at stage 3, which has been called the skeptic individual. Frequently, they are scientists. They're almost always scientifically minded. They can be found in large numbers teaching in schools and universities. They're reporters, columnists, and commentators. They usually adhere to mechanistic views of reality and to secular humanist philosophy, unwilling to consider the existence of anything they can't see or touch. If they truly seek the truth, however, they will eventually graduate to stage 4, and in so doing join a group of individuals referred to as mystical. Mystical because they see a cohesion behind physical reality, an interconnectedness beneath the surface. This is the unseen world that supports and informs physical reality. Without it, nothing could or would exist. The objective of this tape is to explore the nature of the invisible, and in so doing determine how it affects you and me. Perhaps you're thinking, wait, I can't believe this. Things we can't see aren't real. But think for a moment of what you can't see. The space you occupy is filled with television and radio waves. With the right kind of lens or photographic paper, you'd also be able to detect infrared light, which the eyes cannot, and X-rays and gamma rays and who knows what else. What if the instruments to detect them had not been invented? What about a magnetic field? We can't see one or take a picture of it. Or a gravitational field. We know we live in the midst of one because without it we'd fall off the earth. What are these fields made of, and how do they work? These kinds of fields are curved space. Iron is drawn into the pattern around the magnet. The moon follows the curved space created by the gravitational field around the Earth. How can space be curved? It can, it is, because matter isn't really matter in the sense we normally think, and empty space isn't empty. 20th century physics tells us that matter is energy, and that energy is matter. E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. There really isn't any such thing as solid and separate stuff. While physiologists do their best to explain the functioning of plants and animals in strictly mechanistic terms, their explanations of some phenomena are sketchy. One biochemist, Cambridge-educated Rupert Sheldrake, has broken ranks with his fellows and postulated what he calls morphic fields. These fields account for morphogenesis, instinctive behavior, learning, and memory. They are much like fields of gravity or electromagnetism. But they change and evolve as a species changes and evolves. One thing they explain is a phenomena of memory which currently has neuroscientists puzzled: where it is located in the brain. To quote Rupert Sheldrake, a search inside your TV set for the traces of the programs you watched last week would be doomed to failure for the same reason scientists can't find memory in the brain. The set tunes into TV transmissions, but does not store them. In other words, and these are my words, the brain is our physical link to memories located in our individual morphic field. According to Sheldrake's hypothesis, it is the universal field and the morphic fields within the universal field which give form to the physical world, from the shape of the earth and its gravitational field to the shape of your nose and the structure of a crystal. Fields within the universal field, do not remain static but are constantly changing and evolving. The entire morphic history of a species is contained in its field and can be seen unfolding in the growth of an embryo. The collective memory of a species and instinctive behavior are components. Individual memories are contained in the fields of individual organisms. Brains are devices which retrieve these memories. A field can transcend the individuals of a species. For instance, fields unite colonies of organisms such as certain ants, bees, fish, and birds. Thus, an entire colony operates as one. It may be possible that identical twins share a field at some level, just as we as individuals share the field of our species, and at a higher level, the planet. Taken to the highest level of all, the entire field of the universe can be viewed as one living organism of which all others are part. The earth, each individual species, mankind, and every individual plant or animal, including you and me. We are each an aspect of this whole, just as a foot or a nose is an aspect of your body. A human being is not an assembly of parts, but rather a creation of the field, not a sum of individual pieces, but a unified whole. The body and its abilities were shaped by evolution and experiences of the species in an unbroken train all the way back to the first life on earth. As a man grows in spirituality and moves through the 4 stages, he will come to sense his connectedness to all of creation, provided he advances far enough. He may even have a sudden insight, an epiphany, a glimpse of the eternal. As the person who has experienced this grows in wisdom, experiences life, he will begin to see that the idea of fate as whimsical and arbitrary is contrary to personal experience. The 19th century German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer observed that when an individual reaches an advanced age and looks back at his life, it will seem to have followed a consistent plan. Specific events and the meeting of individuals, which seem to have come about by chance, turn out to have been essential components in a constant storyline. Who wrote the story? In 20th century jargon, Schopenhauer would have said that it was an individual's subconscious mind. He would note that our dreams are composed by part of us, of which we're unaware, and would argue that our whole life is created by an unconscious aspect of ourselves which he labeled the will within. This will within coordinates with that of others, so that the whole of human existence comes together like a symphony. Schopenhauer said that it is as though one dreamer were dreaming a giant dream in which each of the characters in the dream has his own individual dream. Now you might ask, what is that part of you, your personal puppeteer, who compels you to play different roles at different times in this giant dream of humanity? Where did this unconscious aspect of yourself come from? Why aren't you aware of it? The answer is that it is your own personal morphic field. It accumulates knowledge and experience. It survives death. It has been around through many incarnations. It is what is known in other times as your soul. Perhaps you have made or were about to make a decision based on some ego demand or urge, that part of you that becomes afraid, that lusts, that rationalizes, that worries what others will think. Something inside you said you would live to regret the decision if you followed through. At that moment, you were in touch, however briefly, with your morphic field, which is your higher self or your soul, the aspect of you that is in touch with and in tune with the big dream and the big dreamer. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the Swiss-born physician and author of the perennial bestseller On Death and Dying, said this in a lecture given in 1977. If you listen to your inner voice, to your inner wisdom, which is far greater than anybody else's as far as you are concerned, you will not go wrong and you will know what to do with your life. Unfortunately, most of us are not in very good touch with this immortal aspect of ourselves, at least not until we become enlightened, and for all but a few, our ego stands in the way of this. Each of us has an ego. It is that part of our consciousness which has developed in this lifetime, from an unfocused awareness in our early days in the crib to the consciousness that contains the memories of this life. It is the part of us that tells us we're separate from the rest of creation rather than part of it. It is our personal identity in this lifetime, the self that worries, that fights for life, for achievement, for glory and recognition. In contrast, the higher self or soul is not concerned with the trappings of the physical world. Most of us who have been around babies and small children whose egos have yet to develop instinctively know these beings have just arrived from some heavenly place. The quality I'm thinking about is one that's been recognized by poets through the centuries and was captured by Wordsworth in the 5th stanza of his poem titled Ode. Our birth is but a sleeping and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar. Not in entire forgetfulness, not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God who is our home. Perhaps you're wondering why you came into this life. Why did you leave your home and come here, trailing clouds of glory? Well, you came to learn. The purpose of life in the physical world is the creation of a separate identity or ego that will eventually reunite with your higher self or soul, bringing experience and knowledge that will lift your soul closer to its goal of perfection. From life to life, a person is followed by the good or the bad he has created. This is called karma. It is the law of cause and effect. Working it out should not be viewed as punishment, but rather as an opportunity to learn lessons which must be learned. Here, for example, is what James, a brother of Jesus, wrote about this. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Dr. Kubler-Ross echoed this in a lecture when she said, "All the hardships that you face in life, all the trials and tribulations, all the nightmares and all the losses, most people view as a curse, as a punishment by God, as something negative. If you would only realize that nothing that comes to you is negative, I mean nothing, all the trials and tribulations, the greatest losses, things that make you say, if I only had known about this, I never would have been able to make it through, are gifts to you. It's like someone has to temper iron. It is an opportunity that you are given to grow." She was correct. And it is also correct that what one gives out will come back. Any Christian is aware of St. Paul's words, "As a man reaps, so does he sow." We create our own reality, a fact which must be digested before we can move to higher levels. Back in the 19th century, in a little book called As a Man Thinketh, James Allen wrote, "The outer world of circumstance shapes itself to the inner world of thought, and both pleasant and unpleasant external conditions are factors which make for the ultimate good of the individual. As the reaper of his own harvest, man learns both by suffering and bliss." Allen's observation should prompt each of us to examine our circumstances for clues as to what we need to do to accomplish what was set out for us before we were born. I will discuss techniques later that you will be able to use to get in touch with your guides and your higher self. But first, there's something else. You may be carrying around excess baggage that is standing in your way. You may not have done so, but if you haven't, I urge you to forgive. Forgive yourself and forgive others. Karma is created by your thoughts, including thoughts toward yourself. If you're in an abusive relationship, get out of it. Get out of it and forgive the abuser. As long as you hold on to bitterness, it will come back to you. Perhaps your parents pushed you in a direction you didn't want to go. Maybe they abused you. Perhaps it all happened a long time ago, yet it still may be having a negative effect on you. What possible good can it do to hold on to those feelings? This need to forgive includes forgiving yourself. What should you do? Pray for forgiveness. Ask God's peace to come into your heart, and become part of a circle of others who are at your stage of spiritual development. Once you have forgiven yourself and others, how can you identify what else may be holding you back? You can do so by tuning in to your moment-to-moment stream of consciousness and realizing what makes you worried, anxious, resentful, uptight, afraid, and angry. Unsettled emotions are the worst form of interference to getting in touch with higher intelligence. As long as they plague you, it will be almost impossible for you to distinguish whether your higher self is communicating to you or if what you sense is your ego conjuring up a buried fear. To deprogram yourself, slow down and consider what triggered a negative emotion. Did your temper flare? Why? Why was it so important for things to go your way? If you retrace what you felt to its cause, in most cases you will come to some variety of fear. Fears usually can be grouped under one of 6 headings: the fear of poverty or failure, the fear of criticism, of ill health, of the loss of love of someone, of old age, and of death. The fear of poverty or failure is mentioned first because in many ways it can be the most debilitating and insidious. Traits develop that bring it about. For example, are you a procrastinator? An underlying fear of failure is probably the root cause and can be counted on to produce just that result. Are you overly cautious? Do you see the negative side of every circumstance or stall for the right time before taking action? Step back and listen for internal voices that say can't, or don't, or won't, or too risky, or why bother. How do you get rid of them? Shoo them away. Know this: the only thing over which you have absolute control is your thoughts. but your thoughts will lead you into good or bad conditions. You may say, I can't control what pops into my head. True. But you can decide whether to discard a thought or to keep it. Beginning now, each time you catch yourself with a negative thought, a thought that says you can't, it's not possible, maybe someone else but not me, get rid of it. What about the other fears? They're to be discarded in the same manner. If you suffer from the fear of criticism, for example, it probably came about as a result of a parent or a sibling who constantly tore you down in order to build himself up. You'll know this is a problem if you're overly worried about what others think. Eliminate this fear. What about the worry of ill health? It should be enough to know that what you worry about happens for you to want to get rid of this. Ever notice that it's the people who talk about illness, worry about illness, are preoccupied with this or that possible illness, think they feel a pain here or there or were exposed to some germ, who are precisely the people who stay sick most of the time? The power of suggestion is at work in their lives. How about the fear of the loss of love? This one manifests itself in the form of jealousy, and like the others is also self-fulfilling. The person you try so hard to hang on to feels smothered, and you end up pushing them away. Next is the fear of old age. This is closely related to the fear of ill health and the fear of poverty, because these are the conditions a person is really concerned about deep down. The power of suggestion is at work here too. If you think you're too old to do this or that, you will indeed be too old. Now I've come to that final bugaboo, the fear of death. There is nothing to fear. Consider the millions who have had near-death experiences and are no longer afraid to die. They've convinced themselves that they'll be greeted by loved ones who have gone before and by their guides. They look forward to being bathed once again in the all-encompassing light, which many have described as total, unconditional love. Most do not expect to experience pain. It has been reported by many that the spirit exits the body the instant it looks as though death is inevitable. Fears are a product of your ego, and they stand between you and a better life. The simplest way to deal with the ego's interference is to observe it with detachment. Don't think of the ego as part of you that must be lost for advancement to be made, but rather as a part that needs strengthening. Imagine your fearful ego as a child who needs reassurance or a student who needs to be educated and brought along. Strengthen it to the point where you will be able to bring it in touch with your higher self and not have it feel threatened. Otherwise, your ego will make a concerted effort to stop the action by drowning out all communication. Most of us have been conditioned since birth to discount what is often called intuition. As a result, we've developed a habit of not listening to the voice of our higher self. If we are to reconnect, the first step is to acknowledge that intuition is real, that our higher selves exist, and that it is possible for us to be in touch. This is characterized by a sense of knowing, but not in the ordinary way. Once, I glanced at the door prize ticket and knew instantly I'd won, even before the numbers were read. The sensation I had was winner. No subject, no object. This sensation has been labeled psychic intuition and was experienced in the area of my solar plexus. It felt as though the string of a viola located inside me had been struck. Not everyone receives intuitive insights or messages from their higher selves or guides in the same way. Some hear voices. For example, after learning I was writing this book, a friend of mine told me his experience in this regard. One occurred when he was at a coming-out party at a country club. The debutantes were taking their bows, being presented to society. But he wasn't paying attention. He was standing with a group of friends, talking and laughing, more interested in joking around with them than in the girls dressed in white doing their curtsies. Out of the blue, a voice said, "Here comes the mother of your children." He wasn't sure whether the voice came from inside his head or outside. "What?" he said. The voice returned with, "The mother of your children is coming." He turned to look. Taking a bow was the young woman he'd met but hardly knew. At that time, he had no plan or desire to get married. He thought this girl was attractive, but he had no particular interest in her then. 2 years later, they walked down the aisle together. As the voice had told him, she became the mother of his children. This form of intuition is called psychic hearing. It can be subtle, similar to what one hears in his mind when he talks to himself. It can also be loud and clear, the way my friend experienced it. Another way messages are received is called psychic vision or clairvoyance. This is a form of ESP which expresses itself as a picture or a symbol or a visual impression. Traditionally, it is associated with receiving visual insights either through meditation or in dreams. You're probably aware of psychics who help police by visualizing the scene of the crime or the location of a body. You may have had experiences with clairvoyance and not even realized it. Have you ever seen, for example, a mental image of an old friend and then received a telephone call or a letter from that person? Psychic intuition, the instantaneous sense of knowing that I experienced when I won the door prize, is the most common form. Degrees exist ranging from a fleeting snippet, which occurs spontaneously, to a permanent gut-level realization, a sense of knowing that flows continuously. It may take years of working at it, but I believe for most, an ongoing connection that gives moment-by-moment guidance is possible, and a realistic goal. Not that we should disregard the rational mind. It has its place. We simply need to recognize its limitations. The rational mind can be compared to a computer. It can sort the data, anything you've read or experienced, cross-tab, analyze, and spit out an answer. Unfortunately, no matter how competent your mental computer is, the answer may not be correct because the analysis is limited to the data your mind had to work with. This does have value, of course. It's probably all a person needs to make the right decision 90% of the time. Your mental computer tells you a stoplight that's red means stop, green means go, don't touch a hot stove, 1 and 1 makes 2. A quick scan of your database is enough. But your higher self should be consulted on the big issues because it is plugged into the infinite knowledge of the universe. It has direct access to the dream and the big dreamer. Let me talk about how to cultivate a relationship with your higher self. Like any, it needs to begin with trust. As we've seen, the ego is terrified of losing control, yet your ego must feel confident enough to allow your higher self to come through. Start slow and ease into it. You might begin by setting aside a few minutes each day simply to daydream. Call this your quiet time. Dedicate up to half an hour twice a day from now on. It can be the most productive and important period you spend. Sit back and relax or lie down. Allow yourself to enter a state of consciousness that's different from what you're used to during normal waking hours. Or you might put on a tape of gentle music or relaxation sounds, such as the sound of surf against the shore. Daydream. This may be enough by itself to create the conditions for insights to come. You may find that you begin identifying your true purpose and mission. Daydreams are often fantasies about who we really are or what we can be. They may be closer to the truth than what you thought was the truth until now. Ask yourself what you would do if you could expand to your full potential. What is your bliss? Are you now doing what you like to do? Does what you do help others? With your background and training, what could you do? If you could have whatever you want, be whatever you want, what is it? How would you do this? How would it help others? Do this each day for several days. What themes reoccur? Write them down. A pattern will emerge. Keep at it. Develop this into a vision. Whatever this entails may at first seem impossible, but this may be your ego throwing up red flags. Don't let it get in the way simply because it's terrified. Stroke it. Tell it you're not going to quit your job. Not this week, anyway. You may modify your vision as you proceed, but don't start out by watering it down because of the seemingly practical voice of your ego. Your higher self already has the end result in mind. Let it help you bring this into focus. The higher self also knows how your vision can be achieved. Allow yourself to be shown the way. Ask for guidance in your daily quiet time. Sometimes the information you need will come immediately. Often it will not. Be patient. An answer is on the way. It may arrive in several days or even a week later. Often I'll ask a question of my higher self and guides at night before I go to sleep. If possible, I phrase the question so that a yes or no answer is sufficient. I conclude by saying, when I wake up tomorrow, let me realize the best course. Give me a sense of knowing. This almost always works. You may be wondering, how can I know if my higher self is telling me something, or if it's some other part of me? Many different feelings and conflicts are going on within me at a given time. Your higher self is never worried, does not know the meaning of fear, so it's not an inner voice that sends these kinds of signals, nor is it the part of you that judges or says you must follow the rules. Communication from the higher self has a lightness to it, a sense of, this is right. It is not an addictive voice either, one that says you need alcohol or drugs or some other person or a new car or mink coat to make you happy. Nor is it the one that says, if only I could get a promotion or win the lottery or score a touchdown, then I'd have what I need. If an inner voice has a sense of urgency to it, it probably has to do with some ego-bound fear or addiction. When you're bombarded with this kind of interference, release it. Let it float away. Go under this flak. Messages from your higher self have to do with what is right in the long run. If you ask for the answer to a short-term problem, you'll receive an answer that will serve you in the long haul. You may not understand at the time why you were led in a given way, but you will when you look back. You'll see it had to do with inner things, with what is of true value, not with what will remain forever on the physical plane. Try making minor decisions to see how it feels. For example, suppose you go to a party and a feeling says this is not where you want to be. Your ego voice may counter with, you can't leave, what would people think? Leave. Go home or wherever your inner voice directs you. When you get there, calm yourself, check your feelings. If you were following higher guidance, you'll feel light, more alive, you'll have energy. Learn to recognize this feeling. In the future, even after you've made a big, potentially life-changing decision, you'll experience this same sense of buoyancy if you're following your higher self. If you're not, you'll feel drained, blocked, maybe even depressed, and it's time to reconsider. As you work at listening to and practice following these messages, you'll find they get stronger and that it's becoming easier to sort ego-based voices from communication that comes from a higher source. Start with matters that aren't all that important and let your confidence build. If you persevere, you will come to a point where you're willing to let your life be guided in this way. Ask your higher self to direct you to a better life. Let it show you step by step. Don't try to force it. Don't make yourself make decisions. Simply let things take place. If you allow yourself to be guided, things will happen. Remain flexible. Trust. Be alert for guidance. It can come from anywhere. Things probably will not work out the way you expect, nor will you end up where you thought your higher self was taking you at the outset. If you go down a path only to find a dead end, look for the open door. It will be there. That's why you came down that path. The question is bound to arise. Can your higher self make a mistake? Can it lead you down the metaphorical primrose path? The answer is an emphatic no. It cannot make a mistake. You may make a mistake interpreting it, but your higher self and guides know what they're doing. They're plugged into the dream and in constant touch with the big dreamer. It won't hurt to be cautious, however. Be cautious until you're 100% confident in your ability to understand what you're being told. Ask for confirmation. Ask for reassurance. Ask and you will receive. But do not ignore your intuition. If you don't pay attention to it, If you do not move at least cautiously in the direction it's pushing you, you'll become blocked. Listening to your higher guidance and learning to understand it is like any skill. The more you do it, the better you will get at it, and the easier it will become. Like anything, use it or lose it. If you happen to make a wrong turn, the mistake will not be a disaster if you are honestly trying to do the right thing. Your guides and your higher self will come to your aid in those kinds of situations. Write down your fears. Turn these statements around into positive affirmations. My needs are being met. My life is getting better and better. Repeat them to yourself whenever a negative thought occurs. It helps to have at least one other person you can talk to about your fears. This should be someone who is also following the path laid down by their higher self. It should not be a family member, co-worker, or anyone who is still in the skeptical stage. They will only reflect your ego fears. And pray. Pray for guidance. Pray for the best possible outcome in each situation. The power of prayer is very real. You are on a spiritual journey. The way may be difficult. It takes courage, and it takes a willingness to change. Man hangs on to his self-centeredness. It isn't easy to let go. To grow requires sacrifice and effort, and man is by nature lazy. Life is the dream of God, and you are a dreamer within the dream. You have a role or roles to play. You took them on, and you made a solemn vow to carry them out before you arrived. You can either make good on your promise, or you can welsh. The choice is yours. If you welsh, you will view the consequences eventually. You will see them and feel them when the time comes for your life to be replayed before you after the death of your body. On the other hand, there is no greater joy in life than doing what you're here for. Getting there will be difficult, it's true. But if you listen and persevere, if you earnestly follow the path laid down before you, you will receive help. Count on it. Look for it. After a while, you'll begin to sense unseen hands guiding you. The way will become less difficult to find. The trials won't be nearly as hard to bear. There will be blind alleys, of course. There will be disappointments. There will be tough lessons to learn. These are part of life. Try viewing them as constructive. Gradually, you will come to a gut-level understanding of what your existence as a human being is all about. In conclusion, let me say that I feel gladness and joy that I may have been a conduit in bringing you a deeper understanding of yourself. My sincere wish is that my efforts will help you move a little farther along your journey. Thanks for taking part of it with me.